Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice, and I'm the lead pastor at Faith Community CRC in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And things continue to be messy in the Christian Reformed Church. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation might look like. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content. And we rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and give good feedback for our podcast. You are the marketing plan. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All of the money raised is used to further the mission and the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is part 1 of our conversation with Stephen Terpstra on Synod 2025. Well, Stephen, thanks for coming on again. This is our second time having you on, and this time in particular, we're going to want to focus on your reflections and thoughts on Synod just a little over a week ago. But why don't you just kick us off again and give us a little update on where you're at in ministry and if there's been any life updates since last time you were on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Jason and Willie. It's great to be back again. And life has been busy, as it is for many of us. Obviously, I was at Synod a year ago also. And then on the last day of Synod last year, the moving truck was at our house, starting to load things up. And 3 days later, we moved out to Orange City, Iowa. So I am now the senior pastor here at First CRC in Orange City. I think we have adapted and gotten to feel really at home. And so it was kind of nice this year after Synod just being able to say, okay, we can just go home and have nothing planned for when we got there. So yeah, it's been a really good year, a year of lots of developments in our family too. Our kids are doing all kinds of things, and that's kind of an exciting stage in life. You know, Our oldest is married. We've got no grandkids yet, but our son-in-law is heading out to seminary. So we're excited about that development. And I had a daughter who graduated University of Michigan about 2 months ago now. And she's heading over to Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia to do a Master of Arts in Religion before she heads off to do her PhD in psychology. So I'm looking forward to a lot of really great theological conversations in the next couple of years with the kids.
Amen.
I think when we go to seminary, we have this idea that church life and being a pastor is going to be like, you know, those coffee breaks in between seminary classes and everybody's debating theology and infralapsarianism and superlapsarianism. And of course, in the real life, that's not at all what it's like.
No, I noticed that my first few years in ministry. Well, even so, before when I was in youth ministry, of course, I had Willie, who was my theological conversation partner, and then I moved out here, and I didn't have one of those for a while, and I really missed having somebody to be able to have those conversations with. Yeah, pastors really hunger for that. So
we do. I think it's one of the important things about connections between pastors too. And that chance to not just talk shop in a practical way, but also just remind ourselves that we're passionate about these things. We get excited about them, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's right. So you're just equipping your theological conversation partners through your family. So
absolutely,
it's even better, really. Yeah. So you threw a lot in last year. So not only is Synod last year you were vice president of Synod, which is a stressful endeavor. And then you moved, which is known to be like one of the most stressful periods of life. So you just packed them one right after the other. So you had a pretty brutal year last year.
Well, we kind of did. And on hindsight, it probably wasn't planned very well, but that's how God moves sometimes. Probably took us all the way till Christmas actually to kind of recover a little bit.
Yeah.
And really feel oriented again. And then I thought for sure, I'm in a new classes. I'm just getting settled in. I had been to one classes meeting. At least I won't have to go to Synod for a couple of years.
And how did that go?
Well, as you know, not great or great, depending on how you want to slice it. But yeah, they decided that they did want me to go again on behalf this time of Classes Heartland.
Mm-hmm.
And so about that time of the year when the church here is kind of winding down, you're thinking, okay, we can start to relax. But that's just when Synod is winding up.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of gear up and yeah. So I thought, well, I guess we'll go back. The agenda certainly was not as heavy this year. Certainly not like 2022 when we had 3 years of material. But there were still a lot of different items on the agenda this year, and some newer ones that I thought were actually really interesting that maybe haven't gotten as much press as some of the others. But really pretty notable.
Yeah. So what? So I've already kind of given it away. We usually ask people what their role was at Synod, but being the president of Synod or the chair of Synod, most people realize that was your role at Synod. I'd love to hear what thoughts went through your mind as you saw yourself being elected to that position.
I mean, in some ways, it's an honor. There's no way around. It's being chosen by your peers is a significant thing. It's also in some ways, I like debating. And so I think one of the frustrations about being president and being an officer is you're no longer the idea person. You're the rule person.
Yep.
And I don't really think of myself as a rule person. I don't sleep with church order under my pillow. I really don't. I really value rules. I think they're really important. Not for their own sake, but they facilitate what we want to do. They make the rest of the work possible in an orderly and a good and a right way. But that doesn't mean I like to be the one sitting up there enforcing the rules. But I also realize that's really significant. And if nobody does that, then we make zero progress. We can't get anything done.
Yeah.
I kind of switch gears. Yeah, just you're suddenly not thinking so much about the issues themselves. Suddenly all you're thinking about is, okay, how are we going to work our way through them? And you pour through those rules of procedure. And you figure out what's debatable and what's not debatable and what needs a second and what doesn't. And you just try to make sure that you're not going to be in the way of the conversation. I think as the president, you want to facilitate and you want to stay out of the way as much as possible. Yeah. And so that's kind of the goal then.
Very wise. Stephen, I'm wondering, as vice president last year, now president this year, do you think that last year kind of helped set yourself up for some success in the chair, kind of like a training ground, or was it just very structurally different being the president as opposed to the vice?
Yes and no. Most of us who have been in church for a while, we've chaired lots of meetings at church. We've chaired classes meetings. Though I suppose for most of us, that's on a rotation, so it's infrequent. But those things are nothing like Synod. Synod is structured in a whole higher order of those other meetings. And it has to be, just because of sheer numbers. And so I was really grateful, both having been vice president, that you understand how the system itself works. How does the speaker queue work? How does the voting system work? How does information get passed between staff and delegates and the officers? And the chance to chair. Those first few minutes when you're first chairing, it's a little overwhelming. I vividly remember my first chance last year, and I think I bungled in the first minute. But you know what? Nothing serious happened, and I learned a lot. And I think, it's one of the reasons why it was really important. Also, I wanted to make sure Ken had several chances over the week to chair. A couple times when I had some, I don't think there was a conflict of interest. but even an appearance of a conflict, I want to avoid. But also so that he had a chance to feel comfortable, that you do it long enough, you're like, okay, I've settled in, and for the future, he is well placed to do it.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful. It's one of the problems. A lot of systems are kind of in place so that you might be the vice chair one year and automatically you'd be the chair the next year. It's more intentional in preparing people. When I think about, not that long ago, when you would show up to Synod and you would just vote in that moment, and they would say, okay, now you've been elected president. You have no idea what that means, but come up here and lead us right now. And I'm sure that was probably overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I think the new system we have, even having those 2 weeks between the opening Zoom session of Synod and when we actually meet in person, is hugely valuable. Yeah. And so I think it's a good system we have now.
Yeah, I agree. I've said that. I give kudos to all of those previous officers who got elected on Friday morning, and then by noon we're already having to lead and figure things out. But having 2 weeks to prepare, just getting your brain around it, like you said, it's a totally different mindset. I don't think people always realize that. I remember even when I was chairing the committee in 2023, I'm like, I actually wanted to be not the chair of the committee. I would have rather been in the committee because I'm like,
exactly.
I like to communicate and wrestle with ideas. And I'm like, now I'm the chair and I have to be unbiased and just wrangle things together. And so it's a totally different thing. And so it's, as the chair of a committee, it was helpful for me to have my brain around the fact like, okay, that's my job. Now I can prepare for that. And the same thing with Synod now. Now you've got a couple of weeks to get your head around it. Like you said, you could start reading the synodical rules of procedure and church order. And, that's your focus, is really that procedural stuff. And so, yeah, I'm really thankful for the changes that we've made in that regard.
Well, and I think one of the things that people don't realize about Synod is, like, at first glance, especially when you're only there watching kind of the deliberations Monday to Thursday, so much of the work of Synod happens in advisory committee.
Yeah.
And the chairs of advisory committees are really, really important. I mean, when they do their job well, the committee can run smoothly, they can come up with good decisions, they can be efficient, and they can be effective and thorough. If those chairs don't do their job well, it can devolve into chaos pretty fast.
Yeah.
Because you have a room full of people who all want to talk, by and large, and all have ideas. And if nobody can manage that, I've seen some committees that have just devolved into chaos over my years at Synod. And it's really unhealthy. And so even though I know all of those chairs, much like the president of Synod, wish they could be part of the kind of internal debate, but it's critical, absolutely critical. And I remember when you had a hard committee that you had to deal with as chair, but you did a great job, and that committee came up with a really strong report, and that was really, really helpful to the work of Synod and the denomination. And so people underestimate how important that is.
Yeah, I agree.
Stephen, as president, you can kind of go into different committees and kind of sit in and listen to what's going on. Was that a new experience for you? Like, not necessarily being assigned to one particular one, but you could kind of float around and see what's going on. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, and I think that's another thing I learned last year. I mean, last year when I was vice president, I don't think Derek went to any meetings, any committees of any kind. He was doing some other things. I had a chance to spend some time in my own committee, really quite a bit of time, because we have this 2 week ahead of time period to prepare. We don't have a lot to do necessarily on Friday, Saturday. So Josh Christophels and I last year happened to be on the same committee, Committee 2. We spent probably half of the time with that committee. But then I also had a chance to float around and kind of get a sense for what was going to be coming. Mm-hmm. And this year I had a strong sense as president, not to go in and contribute to the content of the conversation, but to be at least aware of what was going on, how the progress was coming, and to have a strong sense that we had strong reports that were going to enable a good floor conversation. Because when advisory committees don't do good work, then you have, oh, we got to change this wording and we don't like that. And then things get voted down, or the people try to add on the floor. And with 180 plus voices, you don't want to be editing a sentence.
No.
So advisory committees need to do that work. And so the chance to kind of float around and get a sense, and when I sense that maybe, that wording is going to be problematic, just structurally, because Synod has a way that it works. It's not just what you're saying, it's how you say it. You got to say it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it just doesn't work in the system. And so I found that really helpful. I hope it was helpful for the committees too. But I felt prepared for when those committees then came to present, that I had a sense where they were going, and that the content of their reports were going to be workable on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you give us a little bit more? Because I don't think many people really know what the officers do behind the scenes during advisory committees. I mean, you don't have to get into all the nitty gritty of it, but just maybe help people understand what the officers are doing behind the scenes just to try to facilitate Synod happening effectively.
And I think in the earlier years, 5 years ago, it can be earlier. Back in the olden days, that's when they got to review the rules. That's when they got to prepare.
Yeah.
Because we have the lead up time, now we're mostly answering questions. And that's the other thing you don't realize when you've never been an officer. It's really good work, but it's pretty exhausting because it is absolutely nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
From 7 a.m. till 10 p.m, people are constantly coming to you with a question. How do I do this? Is this wording going to work? We're having this issue in our committee. How can we resolve it? And it's just nonstop. And that's when the other thing we have as officers is we have quite a few assigned meals that we have to go to.
Yeah.
And so kind of on behalf of Synod, we get to go to meals, and they're a real joy. We get to meet with the young adult advisors, with the ethnic advisors, with the ecumenical delegates. We had a luncheon with with the Korean delegates. That was a wonderful meal. But also a chance to connect with a lot of people from really the entire diversity of Synod. And that's one thing that I've really noticed in the last couple of years. Synod is increasingly diverse. I know there's been some accusations that Synod is now against diversity, and there's only one way to think. I'm not sure that Orthodoxy has ever encouraged diversity in orthodoxy. There's obviously always going to be, no matter who you are, there's always going to be some kind of a framework or a structure for what you believe. But as far as people, as far as ethnic backgrounds, places in the world people are from, languages they speak, unbelievable how Synod and the CRC is growing and developing. And I was really encouraged how many of them felt increasingly comfortable to speak, to engage in the conversation, to participate in ways that in previous years maybe they were a little more hesitant, whether that was a language barrier, whether that was a cultural barrier, in just the way Synod operates. But that's really changed. And I think part of that is that as officers, we do get to meet with them, and we do get to encourage them, and we get to answer their questions and facilitate their participation. So I think that's actually, it's kind of exhausting because you're constantly going thing to thing to thing, but it's really worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some of the really unsung heroes of Synod as well are the translators working behind the scenes. I can't even fathom how, because we've got people with different languages sitting there translating the deliberations on the floor, everything into headpieces, into delegates, trying to help them understand nonstop all day long. And I said I only had to experience this one day. On my cross-cultural internship in the Dominican Republic, I sat in on a cultural diversity seminar, and I was the only one that spoke English. And I speak Spanish decent, but not Dominican Spanish, which is like super fast and different. And I speak zero Creole, and it was all Haitians. And so I had to take 100% energy on my part every moment of the day to understand about 15% of what was being said. And I remember when I got home that night, I just like collapsed. I remember looking at my wife. I'm like, I just sat there all day, but I'm exhausted because it takes so much mental focus to try to understand what's happening. And then I sit there and look at these delegates at Synod. I'm like, you're doing this day after day after day after day, and the translators are. And so I don't think people realize how much work and exhaustion that really is to, and I think they're getting better and better at it, because you're right. Every year I've seen just more willingness to stand up and speak to things. And I think we're removing some of those cultural barriers, which is really great.
It is really important. And it's exciting to see their passion.
Yeah.
And again, I'm well aware that passion is sometimes expressed differently from different cultures. But they are on fire for the gospel. The number of church plants that are happening, unbelievable. And obviously, as Synod, that was one of the conversations we had. But the CRC is excited. And I know we've had a couple of hard years, but there was a lot of excitement at this Synod, optimism for the future.
Yeah.
There is work to be done, and we are well equipped to do it.
Yeah. So why don't we dive into Synod in particular now? And I mean, before we get into encouraging, discouraging things, I'd just love to hear your thoughts on the overall picture of Synod, the tone that you felt at Synod, and just kind of general thoughts overall about what happened at this last Synod.
Yeah, I think this Synod for me was encouraging. Not that we agreed on everything, but wouldn't even be good if we did. And so that's not a problem at all. But the number of conversations I had where I heard the confessions come up, confessional integrity, a real sense of agreement. It's been a hard couple of years, but we are where we are. Everybody who was there seemed content with where we are and very much looking to the future. And so now the question was not so much, are we going to theologically go this way or that way? That seemed to be very much a settled issue this year. The question was, okay, what is the wisest thing we can do to move the ball forward? And that's a very different feel of a conversation, because then we can say, absolutely, let's have that conversation. And it's not always obvious what the wisest thing to do is. We could do this, we could do that. How long should we take to do it? Let's have a conversation. But we can have that conversation and come out saying, yeah, that was a good conversation. And we're all happy with the outcome. Yeah. And so that just felt really different this year. And I think this is the way Synod should be. Not that it's never going to happen that you get everything the exact way that you would have done it if it was only you. We don't have a pope. I know Cedric tried to hand off to me a little pope hat. That was a fun little joke behind the scenes. But we don't have a pope on purpose. We want the wisdom of the whole body. It's really important. Yeah. And so I think this was a Synod of just trying to find wisdom for how do we take the next steps.
Amen. And thank God for that, right? That Synod doesn't go the way we want it to, each of us individually, because this is why we're in a denomination, because we recognize that it's not just other people who shouldn't get everything the way they want it. It's also us, because we're also fallen and led astray, and we don't see things clearly. But together as a body, the Spirit's at work leading. And so it's just encouraging. I just keep trying to remind everybody. I'll encourage people, not because we need more downloads, but go back and listen to the Messy Reformation podcasts from 2020, from 5 years ago. And we would end every one of those podcasts saying, what do you dream would happen in the CRC? And it's almost identical. You'll hear pastor after pastor saying what Stephen just described of Synod. It's like, if we get through this fight, we'll have some unity and we'll be in agreement and we'll be kind of moving forward and we'll be having more fruitful discussions. Like, that was over and over what we were dreaming for our denomination. And it feels like we're just getting there closer and closer and closer each year. And so I just encourage people, listen to some podcasts from 4 or 5 years ago. And you'll begin to see how gracious God has been really in the denomination.
Absolutely. And I think there was a lot of hopefulness that this is going to bring about a lot of fruit. I think growth, certainly spiritually, just becoming a fully mature disciple, but also numerical growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of excitement about that possibility. There's a growing hunger in our culture. And I think that as a Reformed church, given our heritage, our confessions, we are really well placed to answer and to provide what people are looking for, if we would just take advantage of it.
100%. That was one of the things. We guess we can dive into this one, but in listening to the conversation regarding the banners mandate, and listening to the younger generation say, there's so many ideas out there. We just want somebody to provide us with some clarity and direction, and just to here's who we are. Kind of take it. It's been what we've been saying for a long time. That this next generation, they want you just to be clear. Here's who we are. Kind of take it or leave it, and they respect that. And so, I'm encouraged. I was encouraged by that conversation, and I think as a Reformed confessional denomination, we are set just beautifully to reach this next generation effectively, for sure.
I think we are, and I think that, again, that the hope would be then that as a denomination, we are not just grudging about it, but excited about the faith that we have, the heritage that we have, the confessions that we have. Mm-hmm. And we are eager to share that in a positive way with the world. We don't have to apologize for it. We don't have to deconstruct it so that it's acceptable to the world. Mm-hmm. I think that's been one of the frustrations. One of the things I think that the younger generations, especially, I know my kids feel that. I know we talk with the banner. There was a time when a lot of CRC people, that was literally the only publication they read. Mm-hmm. That was the entirety of their exposure to ideas. They could not have even imagined a world where we have such unbelievable, not just diversity, but quantity. Mm-hmm. We are bombarded constantly, and it's impossible to know which voice is reliable and which is not. And so I think there probably was a time where a denominational magazine could say, you're essentially exposed to nothing. I've known lots of people who never left their county their whole life. Their one little community was all they knew. For them, it was good to be challenged. Now we are constantly, incessantly challenged. Mm-hmm. And now people are saying, what am I supposed to believe? Help me to understand. Help me to know where some resources are. And don't apologize for it, but be excited about it. And I think if we as a denomination can live into that, amazing what can happen.
Yeah,
I'm excited about it. And I think that was one of the things that came out over and over again in multiple conversations. And every generation has its own challenges. And so we don't want to necessarily say that the way that, let's say, the boomers reacted to the challenges of their day was wrong. That was a very different time and place. Mm-hmm. But the boomers were in charge for a really long time. Well, an outsized amount of time. Relative to often generational change. And I think near the end, their idea of openness became more and more an idea of deconstruction, of not just saying our parents were so zealous and shoved the catechism down our throats and it was so boring. We're not going to do that to our kids. To almost eventually saying we're so sorry that we believe something. We'll stop it. We'll just believe what you believe. Or not believe anything at all, that somehow uncertainty is a virtue. We've confused humility in a really disturbing way. I think one of the things I find the more I learn is the more I realize how little I know. We are very, very finite. And so we're never going to know everything. And that's okay. But there's this giant philosophical confusion. It's true if there's no such thing as revelation. If there is no God, then you would require infinite knowledge to know anything certainly.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have a God, and he has revealed himself, and he's revealed himself reliably and fully. And what he revealed, therefore, can be truly and certainly known. And that's what the world needs.
Amen.
And that's what we have to offer. And I hope that's the direction we head in increasingly.
Mm-hmm.
Your doctoral dissertation is coming out right now, Stephen. Just letting you know.
I get excited about this stuff. So,
well, and I'm kind of wondering, as someone who, is working on a doctorate, but as someone who's also a pastor of a local church, and this year who was in a leadership position in a denomination, as far as like the mind goes, the intellect goes, ideas, actual theology goes, do you think our denomination is in a place where we're actually ready to train and equip people to have greater depth of knowledge in our doctrines, in our confessions? I mean, I know that you actually got a lot of the confessions in your final address. So I'm kind of wondering if you think we're more poised for advance now than maybe the CRC 50 years ago.
I think we are, though, of course, we always had a tradition and a heritage where the CRC had an outsized influence relative to our size over certainly intellectual thought, over Christian philosophy, theology, apologetics. It's one of the things that, in some ways, I think we try to walk away from it for a while there. I think when I was growing up, certainly once I became really aware, there was that growing sense of kind of avoiding our theological heroes and giants. We don't talk about Kuyper, much less Bavinck, much less Berkhoff or Calvin, much less even our homegrown giants like Gerhardus Voss or Cornelius Van Til.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, again, this is one of the things that I think that really, I know there's been some commentary by others in the denomination that we used to listen to interior voices, and this whole new movement is now being driven by the outside voices, and that's somehow a bad thing. I went through Calvin Seminary. I had a wonderful experience there. I had some really brilliant professors, but I didn't learn everything I needed to, and I'm not sure that I came out certainly not ready to preach. I knew how to do exegesis. I knew how to figure out what a text meant, but how to do homiletics, that's a whole different thing, and it's really hard work. So it was really, for me, it was the Young, Restless, and Reform movement. It was going to the Gospel Coalition and hearing, again, ironically, other people excited about our tradition. And how do you preach the gospel? With wildly different personalities, but incredibly effectively. And that got me excited. And again, ironically, I went to Westminster to work on a doctorate, hoping to find probably more of the island theology. But that's where I went to study Voss and Van Til. Because again, our Dutch tradition has hugely informed the work of Westminster Seminary, of the OPC, of the PCA. I know, Kevin DeYoung out of our tradition, and he's the moderator of the PCA General Assembly.
Mm-hmm.
So our tradition continues to have huge impact amongst Reformed Baptists, amongst PCA, OPC. Imagine if we were as excited about our tradition as they are.
Yeah.
And it's our tradition, so I think we can do that. We're allowed to do that.
I even, I've said before, so my undergrad degree was at a Baptist college, and we studied Wayne Grudem's systematic theology. And I remember I found a bunch of lectures from Wayne Grudem on his systematic theology, and he basically even said, well, really, my systematic theology is just Louis Berkhoff adapted to be a Baptist, because Louis Berkhoff's systematic theology is so good.
Yeah.
And so he even was like, Berkhoff's systematic theology is like gold, and I just had to tweak the parts to make it more Baptist. But otherwise, he's like, that's like the standard one. And it's like, guys, we still don't appreciate. I mean, Burkhoff can be kind of dry, and I appreciate Bothridge more, but Burkhoff is gold still. Burkhoff is so good, and I've taught through that multiple times before. And so again, yeah, most people don't appreciate him. Appreciate our tradition. And Voss and Van Til are straight out of our tradition. I mean, Voss, right? He's known for being the first. Voss was the first PhD seminary professor at Calvin Theological Seminary. So he was our golden child until we kicked him out, basically over supralapsarianism. But he's hardcore in our tradition, and we don't hardly talk about Voss, but the OPC guys, boy, they love Voss and Van Til. They're like at the core of what they talk about. That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly into your email inbox. It also gives us the ability to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ's church, and he bought it with his blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season, and keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.